waste my life. I don't wanna waste my time. I don't wanna waste my life living in this world.
With the beats.
It's just some things, there's no going back. You know what I'm saying?
jwoodbeats.com.
Yeah, I'm not the one with the issues. I hear you. Now here is your tissue. If I'm moving too fast, I might have to dismiss you. And it's really too bad, cause I really will miss you. But I'm not the one with the issues. I left him at church when I made it official. I murdered the curse with my own benediction. Left God in the dirt, call it death of the fiction. Superstition will be served an eviction. Competition will be left in the ditch. Oh my God, it's too damn hot in this kitchen. The fishes of men are now swimming with fishes. Oops, my bad, I guess I'm moving too vicious. Verses sold, I gotta put them on your wish list. Bless my soul, cause I'm dodging your little hit list. I guess you know, you just lost another witness.
Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go right now. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, I'm out of here. I can do anything, fuck your opinions and energy. I finally got the epitome. My biggest hindrance was God can't do nothing but fail. Greater is me. I never needed your deity. All of this human capacity. When it gets rough, I can pick myself up and prevail. Cause I don't need anything other than people who fuck with me. Good business, it starts with good company. That's why your boy is obsessed with community. Cause greater is we. We can create opportunity, doing what God never did, cause a God never could, but a people is all we need. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, yeah. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go right now. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, yeah. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go.
Another Wednesday night. So excited to have you all here, man. Let me make sure my mic is on the right mic. And it's not. It's not. So let's get it on the right mic. Yoink. All right, let's get these eyes to home in here. Where is it at? Don't take too long. These people are going to think you're older than you are.
Found it. Now I should be sounding like the voice of God again. We are back in. All right, beautiful. Welcome in, folks. It's beautiful, wonderful Wednesday evening for me, night for some, morning for others. And there's a lot of different time zones. So glad to see you. And since I mentioned time zone, why don't you drop where you are in the chat so we know where you are? We are definitely building up our map and trying to figure out where everybody is because, of course, we're intentional about building community. I see so many of you in the chat already. Oh, that's awesome. Yes. All right. So, man, this is a lot of you. Look at it. This is amazing. I see Eeyore. Yeah. Muttley. Eyes opening, hearts realigning. Susan. Dragons in Genesis. Yes, indeed. Oh, look, is that my wife? That is. And there is Kyle Von Dahl, one of my favorite people in the world. All right, so we're having I think we're going to have a wonderful time. These have been amazing, of course, for all of you. If you haven't been in and you didn't know, for the entire book of Genesis, I have a guest like co-pastor, like throughout this whole time. Like it's the coolest thing ever. We co-preaching Bible study. You know what I'm saying? It's like back in the days when T.D. Jakes and Noel Jones tag team. But, you get what I'm saying. It's really cool stuff, man. And so if you're new to this, I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, you're going to have a great time. Listen, if you're a believer and you're looking for something that's going to help you get a little closer to the Lord, this might not be the show for you. But if you're curious about all things Old Testament, and particularly the book of Exodus, then we're going to have one hell of a good time tonight. Yeah, Eastern time representing. Yes, I love that. I'm going to put this on the screen because I just love when I see stuff like this. Sally Mander says, hey, I love the Dragons in Genesis podcast. I love that. That is so beautiful. I love to see that type of support. And this is a great way to remind folks that a great way to get your comments read tonight is to super chat. That way I'll actually see and know. Obviously I'm me, so I'm gonna engage as much as I can. But if I do see a super chat, then I'm like obligated to do something. I can't just let that thing float on by. All right. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, consider connecting, joining, or supporting this community channel or content in any way that makes sense for you. And check out the merch because it is dope as fuck. Those are my words. I mean, and I'm sticking to it. And also, we do have books, man. If you're interested in some of the things that we've written, someone today told me they picked up Memphis. That is my first novel. I'm working on part 2. I'm kind of in that George R.R. Martin zone now where it's taken me a long time to finish this next one. But it's an enjoyable journey. Oh, and we did get a super chat, so I do need to read it. This is how you super chat. Thank you, Muttley Von Edick, for showing them the way. I appreciate you, man. Much love. Much love. All right, so are y'all ready to get this party started? Are y'all ready for this? Are y'all? Have you got your drinks ready? If you smoke something, is it already rolled up? Or maybe you buy pre-rolls, or maybe it's a cigar, or maybe it's something else. I don't know. Got your snacks, popcorn, gummies, whatever you got. Let's get ready to get this party started as I bring Jason to the stage. Jason, what's up, man? How you doing? How you feeling today?
I'm good, man. And there's like a lot of love for me here in the chat. It's amazing.
Yes.
I got people, talking about how much they love my show, how much they love me. It's always good to feel appreciated. And I just want to let all these wonderful people know that it's this kind of positive interaction that is actually the reason that I'm here. Because my show was supposed to end 8 years ago when I finished the book of Genesis. That was it. It was going to be like about a dozen episodes, one book, do some cool mythology stuff, done. And then it was all of these people like saying, dude, I love your show. I can't wait for, the next episode. What's coming after this? You doing Exodus? And I'm like, I guess so. And so then I committed to doing the Torah. And then now the Old Testament is done. All because of people like this, like you have in the chat right now. So, this is why I do it, because of people like this. So,
oh, man.
Yeah,
I love it.
They not only make the show possible, they make me want to do it.
Yes.
So thank you, all of you.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's the reality, man. The support that shows up in these conversations. When I was a preacher, we call it pulling on you. And that's when you're talking about something and people are really engaged with it. They're really interested. They're really curious about what you're saying. And it pulls on you. It makes you want to talk about more. Like you said, you just says, I was going to stop here, but y'all are still here pulling on me a little bit. So I'm gonna hang out for a little while longer. And so it has been a beautiful, beautiful experience. All right, man. So I think we ended up last week on chapter 20. So today we're going to pick up with chapter 21. Let me go ahead and get this staged properly. And so we can get this bad boy pulled up. And for those of you who are watching, we named this episode, So He Frees the Slaves, Then Gives Them Slaves. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting dynamic because that's the little subtitle for this chapter, The Law Concerning Slaves. Are y'all ready to read this? Let's get into it. Before we get into this, is there anything we should be worried about before we get too deep into this chapter? Is there anything we should be afraid of? Are there any moments we need to zig when we should probably zag?
You're reading the Bible, so I mean, people, you got to remember this is not a children's book. This is we're getting into like an Iron Age law code that is based on Bronze Age law codes. They get some things right, like they absolutely do.
Interesting.
They also get some things wrong.
Yeah.
And like really wrong. Okay. And one thing that I always try to do in my show, and sometimes I catch some flack from this, is that I try to not misrepresent the text.
That's good.
And so, like, some people will try to say, "Oh, well, we got to make sure that we understand that, they're really talking about like indentured servitude because we don't want to make it look like this widely distributed book is actually telling people to go out and own slaves." And it's like, no, okay, look, it literally does. Okay, it talks about capturing people. It talks about selling people. It talks about It's going to outline how to properly sell your own children as property. Okay, so we don't want to make the mistake of pretending the text is saying something that it very much does not, and that's going to get uncomfortable at times because it's going to say some things that are absolutely reprehensible. So we just need to remember that this is not a moral guide. This was a law code for people 2,500 years ago. Okay, and we need to be honest about what the text actually says. And stop trying to pretend. We shouldn't try to save the Bible from itself. We should just say, this is what it is. Okay. And that's why it should be relegated to the realm of, ancient literature, and it shouldn't play a role in, our modern lives and modern politics.
Absolutely. I love the way you said it. And so y'all heard it, folks. Do not pull your morality from this book. Don't do that. That's not a good idea.
Especially not Exodus. Like, I mean, there are a few little bits and pieces, okay? There's a few little things here and there, but a lot of it's like common sense stuff. You break your neighbor's property, you pay for it, okay?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes they're like, so if you break your neighbor's property, which happens to be a human being, give them $30. You know? No, that's yikes. Yeah.
Welcome to Exodus, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight it's going to get deep. We're in the thick of it. All right, so let's lock and load. Chapter 21. These are the ordinances that you shall set before them. And the person who's speaking at this moment, I'm assuming, is God. God is giving these instructions.
Yeah, and this is specifically Yahweh.
Wonderful. This is what Yahweh says, everybody. Thus saith the Lord. Are you ready? Lean in close, sit on the edge of your pews, cheering. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but in the 7th he shall go out as a free person, without debt. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out a free person, then his master shall bring him before God. He shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him for life.
Yeah. So that right there. Okay. So a little bit to unpack here. So basically what it's saying is there's essentially a 6-year time limit on this particular type of slavery. Now, we have to understand that there's multiple types of slavery that are going to be presented within the Hebrew Bible. Okay. Some people say, well, it's not like chattel slavery. It's just indentured servitude. Oh, no, they've got both. Okay. So what they're showing here is more of an indentured servitude. You have a person who has fallen on hard times. They owe a substantial amount of money to someone. They cannot repay it. And so what happens is they become someone else's property for a period of time until they can work off this debt. And so what happens is they go in and once this happens, they could, if the person they owe money to doesn't need their services, they could then sell that person to another like another, Hebrew who has enough money to buy their services. And then that person's going to work for them for 6 years. After 6 years, they're then set free. This was fairly common in the ancient world. And some people are actually going to will point out, oh, well, look, what they did was they limited the amount of time that you would own a slave, and they got set free after 6 years. A lot of their neighbors, the time limit was 3 years. So they didn't, this wasn't like some kind of progressive act they did here. They were actually doubling the amount of time that most of these people were being held captive in order to pay off a debt. And don't quote me on exactly which nations had which time limits. There's a book by Dr. Josh Bowen called "Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery?" And he actually goes through and shows like the relevant law codes from these different nations, and it talks about like this nation said 3 years, this nation said 4 years.
Wow.
And in the region, Exodus has like the longest time period of 6 years before you get set free. Most of the others were about half that. But this was common. You would work a period of time, and then, okay, your debt is now paid, and you can go on about your life. Now, at this point, they're just set free. Okay, you're done. Get out of here. But other parts of the law code that we're going to see later will actually mandate that the master provide some sort of financial provisions for them. They'll have to get some clothes, maybe some goats, some money to kind of get them started so this doesn't happen again. And like that's a good, okay, you had to spend some time to work off this debt. Cool. Now let's give you a head start so that you can, not end up in this exact same situation next year. And so that's a cool little thing that they're also going to do. And now this part about them getting a family. Yeah. This is sort of like this sneaky way of hanging on to them forever. Okay, look, here's what we're going to do.
Yes.
I got you. I've only got you for 6 years. Then I'm going to let you go. Here's a wife. And, oh, look, now you've got kids. 6 years later, all right, you can leave. They can't.
Right.
But you can. You never get to see them again. They're mine. Oh, you don't want to leave your family. Okay. I'm going to pierce your ear. Now, this is similar to that whole covenant theology. You go and you smear some blood on the doorpost, and then you engage in this covenant with Yahweh and all. This is very similar, okay? You would, a lot of times judgments would be conducted near the city gates. You'll see that, there's a thing in the book of Ruth where they're going to go and like a lot of the elders are going to go and like meet by the gates. This is a typical thing where doorways, thresholds, they were very important in the ancient world. And so you're going to go there and you're going to swear to Yahweh, okay, this person is now my property. You pierce their ear, and this is basically a mark that you were an owned person. Wow. And now you get to keep the person for the rest of their life, and they're your property now. Now, there are certain laws concerning how you can treat them, and they're going to tell us that, like how to properly beat your slaves. But yeah, so that's what we're seeing here. And note that it says when a male slave, okay, because there's different laws for men and women, okay? So the male slaves, after 6 years, their debt is done. And this is Hebrews, okay? This is indentured servitude for Hebrews, okay? That's very important to understand because other people don't get these protections. They're like donkeys, okay? They're just property to be owned and, handled however you see fit.
Wow. Okay, so look, y'all, we're just 6 verses in. And we're already getting this good stuff. This doesn't normally happen like this. So I am ready for this. All right. So verse 7, when a man sells his daughter as a slave, he shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no rights to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt unfairly with her. Okay. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish the food, clothing, or marital rights of the first wife. And if he does not do these things for her, she shall go without debt, without payment of money. Oh, okay. That's interesting. What is this? What just happened here?
Yeah, so this is just some good old-fashioned Hebrew human trafficking. You got a kid, and you're like, you know what? These are a lot of mouths to feed, and my neighbor, he wants a wife. I'll sell him my daughter, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. He's going to sell his daughter to another person, and you're supposed to sell it to other Hebrew people. And when it says, he has designated her for himself, that means he has decided, okay, this girl that I bought, who may very well be a child, she is now my wife. Done.
Oh.
And then, or he's like, I bought her to give her to one of my sons. Okay, so like we're literally talking about a human being being purchased and passed around. Okay, but then he's like, okay, maybe he buys her, but then he decides he's not happy with her. Okay, so now she's no longer going to be his wife. Now they have like laws concerning divorce and things like that. And so essentially it's like, okay, you're no longer my wife and you'll be sent out, but you're still going to be sort of cared for. Okay. And so typically they'd be sent out with some amount of money. Maybe they get to go back to their parents' house or something like that. Cause they can't remarry because they're now considered damaged goods. And so
well, damn.
You've got to provide for them in some way. And so and then the thing kind of closes. So the guy, he gets him another wife. Well, he's got some other wife and maybe he likes her more, but he's not allowed to mistreat the first girl that he purchased. He can't say, okay, look, I like my first wife.
Man.
I'm going to give her all the good stuff. And then, I've got a second wife, but the first wife that I purchased, you know what? I'm going to have her dress in rags and eat breadcrumbs off the floor. No, you're not allowed to do that. You still, this is still a Hebrew girl. You have to treat her with some level of dignity, even though you're, literally buying and selling people. You still have to provide for them. So that's what we're reading here.
This is a huge yikes. This is basically God has laid out all the rules because apparently pimping ain't easy. This is apparent. This is why I call God the magical sky pimp. Like he's out here laying the pimp hand down strong. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. And like, note, so if like first after 7 years, she's not released, or after 6 years, she's not released like the male slaves are released in the first few verses. She's owned forever. She's property. And she can be used by her owner however he sees fit. So maybe she just has to help out in the house and make bread. Maybe he's going to take her to her bed. Doesn't matter. He owns her. And the other thing is that if he is displeased with her, she's sent out pretty much with nothing. Like just, okay,
I saw that.
You can go. Your choices are, you can stay here with me, or you can just go. No one's going to marry you, so you've got nothing. Good luck.
Wow.
So yeah, it's like you can stay here and be treated as well as any other wife, or you can hit the streets and beg for food. Those are your options. So yeah, it's like I said, there's some good morality in this book. This isn't going to be the chapter where you're going to find it.
That's amazing. And I noticed, at least unless I overlooked it, it doesn't say anything about her children. if she has any children while being by being the slave of this man, it doesn't say whether her children will be owned by him or owned by her, but I'm assuming she has no rights in this situation. And so if she has children, well, yeah, because they would be her master's children, even if it was the son's children. So if she leaves, that a part of leaving without payment is also leaving without her children as well.
Yeah, because those basically pretty much anyone that the master slept with, any offspring from that are considered like legitimate children to him. So his sleeping with a slave, whether he marries her or not, all of that would produce legitimate offspring. So then if she decides to leave, she has to leave her children behind.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's a lot of penis privilege, man. There's folks, you're going to see a lot of penis privilege in the Bible. If you have one of those, you get to keep your kids. Apparently. Yikes. This is all right. Let's jump into this. I don't see this getting any better from here. This is where we find the true character of Yahweh. And you're going to find like Yahweh can have like 10 seasons of Law and Order SVU by his damn self, where he's the main villain in every one of them. It's like, guess who did it? Yahweh. Every time. Yikes. Okay. All right. So this one is called the law concerning violence. Whoever strikes a person mortally shall be put to death. If it was not premeditated but came about by an act of God, then I will appoint for you a place to which the killer may flee. Interesting. But if someone willfully attacks and kills another by treachery, you shall take the killer from my altar for execution. Whoever strikes father or mother shall be put to death. Whoever kidnaps a person, whether that person has been sold or is still held in possession, shall be put to death. Whoever curses father or mother shall be put to death. When individuals quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or fist, so that the injured party, though not dead, is confined to bed, but recovers and walks around outside with the help of a staff, then the assailant shall be free of liability, except to pay for the loss of time and to arrange for full recovery. When a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished, not put to death. But if the slave survives a day or two, there is no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property.
Let's go.
Yeah,
let's scroll back up a little bit, and let's cover all of this here. So, what we have here, this is all these are about violence. So, first one, if you kill a person, you're done. You get put to death. Now, if the next one, if you attack someone and you didn't mean to kill them and they die, and so we're talking about like manslaughter here.
Yeah.
It says there's a place set aside where the killer may flee. These are these little, we actually get a list of them later. I think maybe in the book of Joshua, where they talk about certain cities scattered throughout Judah and Israel, where guilty people can flee to avoid vengeance from the families of their victims. And so you get in a fight with somebody, you smack them with a rock, and the person dies. You shove them and they fall and they hit their head, and then they die. And you're like, dude, I did not mean to kill this dude. Well, now their family, since you killed them, their family can legally come and kill you. And there's no guilt on. So there's now a bounty on your head. Yeah. A family member can come and just, and you're done. So what do? Well, you could either beg for mercy from their family and promptly get killed, or you can flee to these little sanctuary cities and live out your days and just stay there, and no one can come in and prosecute you for that crime. And so that's what we're seeing here. And we'll get a list of those cities in a later book. But that's what that is in reference to. And so this is like, you could tell this is anachronistic because it's trying to, like, it's talking about these places that exist, and yet they're a full generation away from entering the promised land. Okay. So this is a much later law code. And then, but then it says, like, if it's premeditated, you decided this, you plotted it, you waited in ambush, and you popped up and you killed them. In that case, it doesn't matter where you hide, and it says, like, you can take the killer even from my altar. So not even going into the temple is going to save you. You take that person, you haul them out, and you stone them to death. And then it goes on, like, if you strike your father or mother. So it's like, damn, like, you lay a hand on them and that's automatic death. So we're not even talking about like causing physical injury.
I'd be dead twice now. I'd
right. Be dead. So you got that. And then if you kidnap a person, well, again, this isn't just kidnapping anybody. This is kidnapping Hebrews. Okay, you don't kidnap your countrymen. Because later it's going to say, look, if you want to capture people from our neighboring nations, that's fine. Like, stock up and sell them. That's how you get slaves. So that they're fine with that. Don't do it to your fellow countrymen, okay? And then let's see the next one. If you curse your father or mother. Now, this doesn't mean like bad-mouthing them. It doesn't mean like calling them names. This means calling for Yahweh or some other deity to bring harm upon them, actually laying a curse upon them. So, because you're intending harm to come to these people. So it means a literal curse, not calling them a bitch or something. So, yeah. Let's see. What's the next one? So if you accidentally injured someone, you got to pay for basically the time that they missed from work. It's sort of like a workman's comp thing. So you have that, and then this last one: if you strike a slave so that you cause some kind of lasting injury, that's fine. But like if you beat your slave and they die, well, now we get into this sort of gray area. So they have to clarify, when is it okay to beat your slave and when is it not? And so the way this works is if you beat your slave so bad that they die right then and there, obviously you meant to kill them. You beat them to death. That's not okay. And so you have to be punished for that. But they don't tell you how the master is punished. But then if you beat your slave and they survive a while and then die, obviously you were just beating them and you accidentally went too far. And eventually they succumb to their injuries. That's not your fault. Your slave was just too weak. And that's what we're seeing here. They're like, okay, look, it's okay. And later books are actually going to tell you, like, you cannot get a slave to do what they're supposed to do without beating them with a stick. So it's the Bible's literally like, beat them, cause them harm.
Yes.
It's okay. And if they eventually die, that happens. Just don't beat them to death on the spot. That's wrong. Wow. And so that's what we're reading here.
And so, folk, for those of you who are watching and listening, this is Yahweh speaking, right? Now, it's Moses doing the talking, but this is Yahweh. He's speaking on, but he's literally saying, this is what Yahweh is saying. This is your God. Is this your God? Is this your champion? Like, this is where I feel with this, because this guy is horrible. And I just saw a pregnant woman in the next sentence, and I'm like, damn, why didn't I see that earlier? That should have had something to do with today's title. All right. So when people are fighting, when people who are fighting injure a pregnant woman so that there is a miscarriage, and yet no further harm follows, the one responsible shall be fined what the woman's husband demands, paying as much as the judge determines. Interesting. If
Yeah. This is
oh my
basic
goodness.
property damage, property
Yes.
rights here. Okay,
Yes.
it's the same thing. And you're going to see this a lot for all sorts of things. If you accidentally kick over your neighbor's planter and it cracks the pot, you pay them the cost. That's what we're seeing here. Okay, you accidentally caused a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say anything about the woman.
Nope.
You pay property damages to her owner, her husband.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry about that. Here's $10. Cool, done. These are the things that pastors will skip. Okay,
Yes.
They'll do that 10 Commandments, and then they're skipping the whole next chapter.
Absolutely. Because this is the next chapter.
Yeah. You read the 10 Commandments. All right, done. Oh wait, let's do that golden calf thing. Get away from those idols. All right, done. Let's move on to the land of milk and honey.
Oh man.
There's a lot of skipping around in there.
This is very interesting to me because this is which I know there's other things in the Bible that will hint at this as well, but this definitely shows that God doesn't consider the fetus a human life here, because again, this is Yahweh talking, and He is not treating this situation as where you do this, now we got to go out and kill somebody. That the person who causes this harm does not have to do anything unless further harm is caused, and that's beyond the miscarriage itself. So God is not like, oh no, you just killed this precious little life, which is the message that we get from evangelical Christians, that God is so concerned about those precious little unborn lives. But in this case, God is literally giving instructions that saying, if you accidentally kill a baby, just pay the cost and keep on ticking. This is what God says.
Yeah, don't even say you're sorry to the lady. Just give her owner, what the two of you agree on is a fair price, and call it a day. It's all handled like property rights, which is,
that's insane.
And there's a reason for that, because that's exactly what they're doing here.
Wow.
And this was common in the ancient world. A lot of times it was like, you have a class of people, they have basic rights. Everyone else is considered property to some extent. They may have rights, but not as much. And so it's sort of like your personhood is on a gradient, okay? You're not all equal. And so, like I said, this was fairly common. You read like the Code of Hammurabi, you're going to see a lot of these same things in there. Actually, you're going to see a lot of these same laws written verbatim, because like they literally copied a lot of this from the Code of Hammurabi. This section was probably written while they were still living in Babylon, and they were copying it from the giant stone obelisk that they had set up in every major city across the Babylonian Empire. This is where they got it from. So they just kind of put their own spin on things. This is just a pretty common ancient law code. This wasn't some sort of grand, like, groundbreaking thing that Yahweh handed down. This was par for the course, and in some cases it was worse than what their neighbors had.
Wow.
So this wasn't like, oh, Yahweh introduced civilization to the people. And without the book of Exodus, it would have been so horrible. Really? Because like Moses had to flee Egypt after killing someone because the Egyptians had a law code.
That's right.
That's
right.
We've got law codes that predate the Hebrew language. Okay,
wow.
So
For damn sure.
It's not. None of this is groundbreaking at all. it's typical. It's run of the mill.
This is basic. All right. This is basic. I love it. I love it. All right. So if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, and stripe for stripe.
Copied verbatim from the Code of Hammurabi. Like, there are very few changes in there.
Wow.
But yeah, that section right there, you can find it in the Code of Hammurabi.
Got him.
Yeah. That's
I love it.
Right out of there.
When a slave owner strikes the eye of a male or a female slave, destroying it, the owner shall let the slave go, a free person, to compensate for the eye. If the owner knocks out a tooth of a male or female slave, the slave shall be let go, a free person, to compensate for the tooth.
They're
Yikes.
literally talking about beating. So you have an indentured servant. This is your neighbor who owes you money.
Right.
You've taken him into your house so he can work off the debt, and you beat him so fiercely that he loses one of his eyes, and you're like,
It's not like you were pistol whipping him.
We'll
Like,
call it even now. All right, that $50 you owe me, we just ain't gonna worry about it.
Man.
Yeah, that's what we just read.
Yikes. That's man, I tell you, I'll probably be trying to get a tooth knocked out, but an eye is just too much.
Right.
All right, now we get to laws concerning property, as if all of these laws before have not been about property. Very interesting. All right, so when an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox shall be slain, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. If the ox has been accustomed to goring in the past, and its owner has been warned but did not restrain it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on the owner, then the owner shall pay whatever is imposed for the redemption of the victim's life. If it gores a boy or a girl, the owner shall be dealt with according to the same rule. If the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall pay to the slave owner 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned.
Yeah, so basically, if it's a one-time thing, like everything's fine, and then one day the ox kills somebody, okay, you probably didn't know. You kill the ox, you're done with it. If this has been an ongoing problem and it's routinely attacking people and you've done nothing, then obviously you're responsible, and then you and the ox share the same fate. Now, it's curious that you don't eat the ox after you kill it. And it doesn't go into why, but I think I know.
Talk to me.
They have this whole thing about categories, okay? And they get really deep into it. And they're like, look, this is a proper herd animal. A herd animal, it has cloven hooves, it walks on 4 legs, and it chews cud.
Yeah.
But if it has some of those things but not others, like a pig walks on 4 legs, it has cloven hooves, but it does not chew cud, therefore you can't eat it. It's not a proper herd animal. But then you go to something like a sheep or a goat. Oh, well, they do all those things, so it's cool. And then they start talking about rabbits. Well, rabbits, they have 4 legs, and they chew cud, but they don't have cloven hooves, they have paws. So it's not a proper herd animal, so you can't eat it. It doesn't fit the category. And now they actually say this. The problem is rabbits don't actually chew cud. They just make little motions with their mouth, and they thought that they were chewing cud. So Yahweh gets it wrong right there. He doesn't know that rabbits aren't ruminants. But later he's also going to say that insects have 4 legs. And bats are birds.
Not how that works.
So, Yahweh gets a lot of stuff wrong. So what I think here that is going on is basically the ox is behaving like a predator, not prey. And I think, and that makes it not a proper animal, not a proper herd animal. It's not a proper cow. And also it now has blood on it from someone else. It carries an amount of guilt. Now you got a problem. It is corrupt. And so I think that is why you're not allowed to eat it, because your cow has now been corrupted. Now, whether or not you eat the owner after you put him to death, it doesn't say. You may be able to. I don't know.
Oh snap!
Yeah, it doesn't say. Now, me personally, I only eat oxen that have gored other people to death. They have the tastiest meat.
Oh, this is hilarious. Okay, all right. So this is funny. And so if someone leaves a pit open or digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution, giving money to its owner, but keeping the dead animal.
And you gotta wonder,
got a free lunch?
Like, what happened? Like, a specific event happened to make them write this down. Okay, somebody came to a judge and was like, "Dude, he killed my donkey," and they're like,
"Yes,
no, I didn't kill it. It stumbled into a pit," and they're like, same thing. And eventually someone had to do a ruling on it. It was probably Solomon in his infinite wisdom. But yeah, like this is a very specific type of circumstance here. If an animal stumbles into a pit, but if you see how this goes, it's your fault for digging that pit and not putting a little fence or something around it, and so anyone could fall in. So, yeah, you get to keep the dead animal, but you break it, you buy it. So you have to take responsibility for your carelessness. So that's actually a pretty good law. I'm glad they put that one in there. But I think it's kind of like quicksand. You're probably not going to encounter this situation that often in real life.
This is just mind blowing to me. And so he says, if someone's ox hurts the ox of another, like they're going oxes all the way down at this moment, so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the price of it. And the dead animal they shall also divide. But if it was known that the ox was accustomed to go in the past and its owner did not restrain it, the owner shall restore ox for ox, but keep the dead animal. So I'm guessing they were having a lot of ox battles back in these days.
Yeah. I'm guessing it was like an ox fight club or something. We don't have any record of that because, the first two rules are that you don't talk about Ox Fight Club. But
that's right.
Yeah. Again, it's all about, hey, you got to take responsibility for your own, okay? And if your ox is out there just murdering a bunch of oxen, that's on you, buddy. You should have done something about that.
Absolutely. Oh, man. Well, we made it to the end of this chapter. Let's roll on to chapter 22 and see how this story improves, if such a thing can be hoped for. All right, so here we are, which I think I remember this. It says, when someone steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, the thief shall pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If the thief is found breaking in and is struck dead, no blood guilt is incurred. But if it happens after sunrise, blood guilt is incurred. The thief shall make full restitution, or if unable to do so, shall be sold for the theft. When the animal, whether ox or donkey or sheep, is found alive in the thief's possession, the thief shall pay double. When someone causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over or lets livestock loose to graze in someone else's field, restitution shall be made from the best in the owner's field or vineyard.
Now, this part about the thief.
Yes.
So what's going on here? The reason why you're allowed to kill him at night, but not during the daytime, is because, like, in the daytime, it's easier for you to, like, apprehend a thief. Because you can chase him out of your house and your neighbors can just dog pile on him and you can hog tie the dude and bring him before the judges and now he's caught. But at night, everyone's asleep. You know, you're alone in your house. Okay, you just crack him over the head with a rock and throw him in the pit that you dug to trap the oxen and you're all good. So that's why you're not allowed to just murder the dude in daylight hours, only at night.
Yeah. That makes sense. You can't kill nobody in broad daylight, but at nighttime you can't see him, and so you got to kill him to prove that it was him. That's the only way you can prove that it was him.
Uh-huh.
This is hilarious. This is yikes. All right. So when fire breaks out and catches in thorns, so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field is consumed, the one who started the fire shall make full restitution. When someone delivers to a neighbor money or goods for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, then the thief, if caught, shall pay double. Yeah, that makes sense. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house shall be brought before God to determine whether or not the owner had laid hands on the neighbor's goods. In any case of disputed ownership involving ox, donkey, sheep, clothing, or any other loss of which one party says this is mine, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to the other. Now,
you're probably thinking, how does God determine this?
Yes.
Like, I mean, okay, there's this whole thing. You got two people. They both lay claim to something. You've got to figure it out. Now, in the book of Samuel, or is it Kings, whichever one Solomon's in and he builds the temple.
Kings.
They're talking about how wonderful and wise the man is, and so these two women go before him, and they're both laying claim to a baby. And Solomon has a brilliant way of doing it. He's like, you know what? Why don't we just cut the baby in half and you each get half the baby?
Yes.
And one of the women is like, you know what? That's a good idea. And this other woman's like, oh my God, no, just let her keep the baby. And they're like, that's the mother, because only a mother would rather give up the child than see it cut in half. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people would be like, you know what? I'd rather not see a baby chopped in half today in the throne room.
Yes.
Okay. Not that bright. But in here, how do they take this case before Yahweh and get a ruling on it? You know, you and I are each laying claim to this oxen that fell in a pit that may or may not belong to either of us. Who does it belong to? Okay, we bring our case before God, and then God decides, and that person gets the item, right? But how does it work? Later in this book, we're going to get to it. It's the Urim and Thummim.
Oh, the Mormons people love this.
Yeah. And what's going to get you is how simple and stupid it is. So they have this magic breastplate that's got a bunch of stones and stuff on it, 12 of them, one for each tribe of Israel. And then, like, tucked behind it, it's got like a pocket, like those little bib overalls that kids would wear, and they would like always stuff things inside there. And there was always a toad, you know? So the high priest, he's got this, okay? And he's got like this little pouch in the front of his fancy breastplate, you know, like a kangaroo. And inside it has these two magic stones, the Urim and Thummim. And this was used for judgment. It's basically a coin toss. You go before him, and he's like, I will summon the judgment of Yahweh to render a ruling. And then he reaches in and he pulls out a rock. And if it's one rock, then he has decided for your case. If it's the other rock, he has decided against it. That's how it worked.
This is reverse Connect 4. He has a Connect 4 thing on his check.
Yeah, he had 2 rocks of identical size and shape, but different colors tucked in there. And he would just pull one out at random. If it's a white rock, you get the oxen. If it's the black rock, you're a liar. It goes to the other guy. That's how they did it. That's what the Urim and Thummim was. Now later, with Joseph Smith, it's these magic rocks, and he puts them in a hat, and if he stares through the hat, it reveals the word of God and allows him to translate stuff, and he just makes shit up off the top of his head and dictates, an entire book to people, and they write it down for him.
That's yep.
But yeah, that's how these things worked. If you didn't know, you guessed.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, God said it was so. Yeah, they could have just done a coin toss. But they've got magic rocks to do it.
That's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, let's see here. When someone delivers to another donkey, ox, sheep, or any other animal for safekeeping, and it dies or is injured or is carried off with anyone seeing it, an oath before the Lord shall decide between the two of them that one has not laid hands on the property of the other. The owner shall accept the oath, and no restitution shall be made. But if it was stolen, restitution shall be made to its owner. If it was mangled by beast, let it be brought as evidence. Restitution shall not be made, for the mangled remains. When someone borrows an animal from another and it is injured or dies, the owner not being present, full restitution shall be made. If the owner was present, there should be no restitution. If it was hired, only the hiring fee is due. These are a lot of laws for just the animals, man. I'm blown away. All right, let's see here. Oh, now we get into the social and religious laws. I'm sure this is going to get better.
Yeah, and a lot of these are actually copied from, I think, Deuteronomy 22, I believe.
Okay, yep.
So, yeah, this is... sections of Exodus are younger than certain sections of Deuteronomy. So there's a good chance that Deuteronomy came first, and this section right here is borrowed from Deuteronomy 22.
That makes sense. I can see that. Well, let's get into this. I'm intrigued by the first sentence already. When a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged to be married and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. But if her father refuses to give her to him, he shall pay an equal amount to the bride price for virgins. Yep, I do remember this from Deuteronomy chapter 22.
And they're being really gentle with this phrasing.
Yes, because that's not how. Yes,
he's not seducing a virgin. Okay, let me spell it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
When a man rapes a virgin and she has not already been sold to someone else to be this other dude's wife, the rapist pays the rape victim's father to buy her, and now she belongs to him as his wife. So if there's a chick you like and she wants nothing to do with you, that's how you get her. It costs $50 and then assault. But the father has veto power, because remember, like, he doesn't have to do this willingly. She is her property until he sells her to her rapist. So he can be like, nope, I don't like you, So you got to give me the $50 and go away. And now she'll just be like a housemaid for the rest of her life because she's not supposed to marry anyone because now she's damaged goods. Done.
Wow.
That's what we just read in verses 16 and 17.
Wow. And immediately after reading it, like I was immediately triggered to the Deuteronomy 22 version of this because it does kind of go a little harder in Deuteronomy. And that was one of the verses that a friend of mine that she read, and that's what led to her deconversion, where she was just like, oh, this God is not a good guy if these are the rules that he's doling out. So this is rough. Hold on to your britches, folks. It gets worse from here. Man. So verse 18, you shall not permit a female sorcerer to live. Now, were they okay with male sorcerers? Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, so what we're getting into with this one is they're getting rid of certain temple practices. And also practices outside of the temple as well. So people who are practicing like herbalism and things like that, they're like, you know what? We have these male priests of Yahweh. They can do this stuff.
Yep.
But the women, they were often doing this during the worship of other deities.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, we're clamping down on that. And so they're getting rid of like the worship of Asherah. They're also getting rid of all the priestesses that used to practice openly in the Jewish religion.
Ooh.
And so they're wiping out a lot of parts of their old religion and getting to this thing where they're only focusing on one deity and only a select group of people are allowed to perform these rituals.
No,
we're going to get
that's
really deep into that in a few more chapters as they really start going into the whole thing about the Aaronite priesthood and the Zadokites and why the Levites are a bunch of scumbags and all of that.
okay. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And it's like almost each of these verses in this chapter could probably be episodes of their own, because then we'll definitely see, or in the story rather, we're seeing a shift to the more patriarchal view that we eventually get, and then just being able to highlight that this one, especially verse 18, is putting that focus on a woman. Because I'm so used to reading that as you shall not permit a witch to live. Mm-hmm. This reading, you shall not permit a female sorcerer to live, triggered me a little differently. And then especially you adding the nuance of this is about a female who is basically a priest. This is a female, this is a priestess. And that and then of course tying that back to Asherah. This is we're basically destroying that any women power system that has been going on here, which we can kind of see even back to Genesis when I believe it's Rachel. She has her father's idols that she brings along with her with Jacob at one time. So we see that type of activity going on. And of course, we know it kind of interrupted with Joseph's life for a while because he married a priestess of Egypt and had children with the priestess of Egypt. But then so now just seeing that, you can see the shift in the narrative where the writers are wanting to make this absolutely clear that we're with the one God, and the one God we chose to be with is the God with the penis. We're choosing that one. So, and because typically at these times you'd represent the God that you identified with gender-wise or what may have you. So that's some good context. Each one of these verses could be a whole episode. That's insane. All right. Speaking of each of these verses being a whole episode, verse 9, verse 19, I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to pause because I know there has to be some insight here. Whoever has intercourse with any animal shall be put to death. Who was the reason that this had to be put in here?
I don't know. I don't want to know. It may have something to do with that lady they were talking about in Ezekiel, was it 23?
Oh, yes.
Lusting after her, you know. I don't know. No, this is our category confusion. You keep things a certain way. They want things very well organized.
Yeah.
And this may be something that they got from the Persians, from Zoroastrianism. They had, like a lot of people had, you know, their own weird little hang-ups and stuff with food, with sexuality, all sorts of things. But the way their hang-ups were defined and identified is very similar to what you find in Zoroastrianism. And it comes this whole weird category confusion because they thought everything should be neat and organized and orderly. And
I get it, yeah.
It goes back to this, there was this legend where Ahriman, who was this evil spirit, he was sort of like the evil twin of Ahura Mazda, who was the big creator god. Ahriman the opposer, or in Hebrew, Ahriman ha-Satan, that's where your, you know, Satan figure comes from. That's how you get the personified evil. They got it from him, or from the Persians. He decided he wanted to make his own creation. And so he looked out at the perfect creation that had, you know, all the like proper animals and everything. And he started to make his own. But because he was this impure and corrupt creature, whenever he made his own creatures, they all came out a bit wrong. And so, like, his lizards, they came out and they didn't have legs, and that's how you got snakes. And, like, he tried to make these, you know, oxen, but the horns were by their face, and they had these really long noses, and they had these weird paws instead of hooves, and that's how you got elephants. And all these different things. Like he tried to make a horse and ended up with camels, you know, all sorts of stuff like that, okay? And that's where all these animals came from that don't quite fit their crude attempt at taxonomy. And so we think that this heavily influenced the same little ideas that you find in Judaism, where they have these very strict ideas concerning, you know, taxonomy and behavior and things like that. So, like, a lot of people had no problem with homosexuality, but then you look at the Hebrews and they're like, "Oh, we'll just kill you for it."
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, like, what's up with that? And when you read it, they're like, they don't just say, "Oh, don't do this thing or you'll die." The way they do everything else, they say, like, if a man lies with a man as you would with a woman, it's like, oh, you're saying you're supposed to behave a certain way in these situations, but you're confusing the categories. A man is playing the role of a woman, and that's what you don't like.
Wow.
And so it looks like this isn't definitive, okay? We don't have a thing, you know, where like they were copying pieces from this. We don't have that, unfortunately. But it very much looks like that. They borrowed so much else from Zoroastrianism that it's hard to think that this idea wasn't also incorporated. And so there's a thing, if you do this, what could be the like, is this how you get centaurs? Like,
right.
Like some chick sleeps with a horse and all of a sudden, you know, you got this centaur? That could be a problem, man. You know,
man.
Those dudes are fast. So, you know, who knows what could happen? And so it's like, if you do this thing, maybe you're one of those creatures that Ahriman created. You know, you're supposed to be a proper thing that fits neatly into a category.
Well, you know, I think centaurs would change the game of polo forever. Like,
man, right?
Oh my
My
goodness.
girlfriend actually talked about that. Like, we had a conversation about centaurs playing polo about 2 weeks ago.
Wow. I want to see that show now. Like, it has to be a thing.
Right?
Oh, we got a super chat. Norbert, man, always love you, sir. This is great stuff, guys. How is it that non-believers can use this Bible against the one who believe? Love you guys. Oh man. Yeah, it's shoot, just reading it, honestly. It gets it done. You read it and you talk about it, and that's one of the things that I love. I think I talked about it in my recent video today, is that the moment we treat this book like literature and treat this book like every other book, it becomes easier for most people to separate themselves from it.
Yeah.
In the same way, most of us was introduced to Zeus as mythology. We were introduced to Thor as mythology. And because of that, we've never felt compelled to go out and worship Zeus or Thor or anybody else, though we appreciated the stories, and it also gave us a greater appreciation for the characters. It's going to take us a long time to like Yahweh because he's been a problem for us, you know?
Yeah. And speaking to Norbert's point, like that's sort of like what my whole show is about. That was actually like an unintended consequence. I was never doing this to like go after believers. But that kind of started to happen. But just reading and understanding the thing, studying the thing, and having honest, gentle conversations with believers concerning their book. And that's one of the reasons I like talking to like biblical literalists more than, you know, the more liberal-minded Christians, is because they're more honest about what is in their book. Now, I'd rather the others vote more than the ones who are more literalist, but because they, you know, they see this stuff and they're like, oh yeah, man. I mean, like, my pharmacist is a woman. That counts as sorcery, right? I've got to get rid of her, right? You know, it's horrible. But the more literal they are, the more honest they are about the stuff, and the less flexibility they have with it. So when they see these things and they're presented with what it says plainly, they don't have as much wiggle room. They don't allow themselves that wiggle room. They're not just going to try to interpret it a different way. They have to figure it out. And it's much more difficult for them to come to terms with it. And what often happens is these things pile up and it conflicts with their own innate desire to be a good person. And eventually they realize that there's large portions of the Bible they have to stop reading, they have to stop adhering to. And then they're only one step away from realizing that they don't need this to be moral. They are moral in spite of this. So just have the conversations if it's safe to do so and if you're comfortable doing it.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. And for those of you who may have not caught that pharmacy reference, he said that for a reason. That's the word that's used here. The word that is used here, or the word is used in the Greek translations rather, is pharmaceua, which is where we get our words. That's right. It's an herbalist. That's it. Man.
These are the same people that were, persecuted in Europe many centuries later. Like the whole thing with like witches putting children in ovens. That was actually a thing. The hearth was warm.
Wow.
And so babies, it gets cold in Europe. Okay. They would actually take babies and put them inside of a warm hearth because, it was warm.
Yeah.
And then
like an incubator almost.
And like this was a good thing. Oh, hey, we got one warm place in the house and it's only big enough for a roast or a baby. Okay, it's not hot. Cool. It's just warm. We'll put the kid in. Oh, look how good he's sleeping. Awesome. Yeah. And then they're like, look, they're trying to cook your children. And it's like,
they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats.
Yeah. And it's like, dude, this is the same nursemaid who put you in that thing when you were a kid. What do you mean they're trying to eat the baby? You know, oh, and so yeah, it's the same thing. It's just, you know, let's go, you know, harm a bunch of people because they're able to do something, and we want to appropriate that power.
That's really good.
That's what you're seeing here.
That's really good because we saw similar things happening in Louisiana, Mississippi, and around the Haiti area with hoodoo, voodoo, things of those natures. What has evolved into a very sensationalized practice initially began as ultimately herbalism. This was knowing the ways that nature worked or what have you, and integrating those things. But in that same manner, you see how people take those things and say, nope, this is witchcraft. These folk got to die. This is black magic, you know. So this is good. All right. So we got all of that from intercourse with an animal. This should have been the bestiality episode, you know. Verse 20, whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. You shall not abuse any widow or orphan. If you do abuse them, when they cry out to me, I will surely heed their cry. Maybe 400 years later, my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children orphans. Dang. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you shall not deal with them as a creditor. You shall not exact interest from them. If you take your neighbor's cloak as guarantee, you shall restore it before the sun goes down, for it may be your neighbor's only clothing to use as a cover. And what else shall thou person sleep? And when your neighbor cries out to me, I will listen, for I am compassionate. You should.
Real quick. So
yes.
You know, it talks about dealing with resident aliens. So that's a thing that'll pop up throughout the Old Testament. So people could come from other lands and basically seek protection or whatever. Now, they weren't considered a full citizen, but they were granted certain rights. One of the things was harvest gleanings. Whenever you harvested your produce, you know, your corn, your apples, whatever, you left a certain percentage of it in the field or on the trees or on the vine. And then the resident aliens would come by, and then they would pick up the rest, and that was theirs. Okay. This is another common thing that, you know, appears in law codes in the ancient world.
Don't we see, is it Ruth that we see do this later on?
Yeah. The whole setting of the story, she's over there, like, you know, picking up the gleanings and stuff after the harvest. And that's how she earns her living in that story.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what you're seeing there. And you're not supposed to mistreat the resident aliens. This is one of those things that, again, the evangelicals like to skip over.
Oh, man.
You know, and then another thing, it talks about like how you are not allowed to make sacrifices toward any god other than Yahweh. Notice that it doesn't say there aren't any other gods. It just says you're not supposed to offer sacrifices to them.
I noticed that. Yes.
Yeah. So the person who wrote that, you know, doesn't seem to have this idea that later people have, that there's only one God. And another thing is, let's pretend that this story was written, you know, in like, I don't know, 1200 BCE or whatever, whenever Moses was supposedly around. Well, there's a problem. The Jews were still worshiping other gods for many centuries later. Like in Elephantine, Egypt, they had this whole thriving Jewish community with their own temple, and they had multiple gods, including Yahweh's wife, the goddess Anat. And they're worshiping these gods openly, and they're communicating with the temple in Jerusalem on a regular basis. We've got all these documents, these letters going back and forth between this this community in Egypt and the people in Jerusalem. And the people in Jerusalem have no problem with this other community worshiping all these gods. Like, they don't see anything wrong with it. They never mention, they're like, you're a bunch of filthy heathens because you have all, and Yahweh having a wife, what's that about? No, they have no problem with it. Okay, that's because there was no problem with it. It was okay according to them. And this goes all the way up to like the 6th century BCE. So like, we're talking like leading right up to the Babylonian exile. So like the whole First Temple period, there's no issue at all with them having multiple gods. And even in the Second Temple period, there's still so much evidence that during that time period, they were worshiping multiple deities. They'll even be complaining about it in later centuries, going all the way up to like the mid-2nd century BC. So we're talking less than 200 years before Christianity. There are some Jews who are still worshiping other deities, and other Jews are saying, I don't think that's right.
Wow.
So they're still developing this whole monotheism thing. And it actually gets worse than that, because in the Christian period, you still had Jews who believed in multiple gods, and that El Elyon and Yahweh and Asherah were all alive and well, and they were working, like they were influencing events in the Christian period. And that the Holy Spirit was the goddess Asherah. And so we're talking like, and El Elyon was the father of Jesus, and Jesus was Yahweh. So like, we're talking about the first couple centuries of Christianity. We still have polytheistic Judaism. So this is like, it's an ongoing development. It takes a great deal of time to get to monotheism.
This is beautiful. This is beautiful. I love it. And let's see here. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. And then, of course, they give us these usury laws here that they're kind of talking through. And then he says, verse 28, you shall not revile God or curse a leader of your people. You shall not delay to make offerings from the fullness of your harvest and from the outflow of your presses.
Right there.
Let's go.
This little section right here, starting with verse 29. Okay. When you go to harvest something, the first portions of it belong to Yahweh. All right,
first
you go.
Fruits.
Yeah, this is the first fruits offering. You go, you're getting all that stuff from your garden. All right, I'm going to take the best of the first things that I gather, and I don't get to touch these. These get offered to Yahweh, okay, as thanks for him giving me the fruits in the first place, okay? Do not delay in this. All right. Now continue with the firstborn.
Wow. So is it the firstborn of your sons you shall give to me? You shall do the same thing with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall remain with your mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be people consecrated to me. So you shall not eat any meat that is mangled by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. Oh, they have dogs around this time.
Yeah, and they talk about, okay, the firstborn of, your oxen and your goats and stuff. Also the firstborn of your sons.
Yes.
Oops, they forgot to delete that little part that mentions human sacrifice right here.
Wow.
Whoops.
Yikes. Oh man, and like my mind just walked right past it too. But that's exactly what that is.
The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and your sheep. And this is right after you will take the first of your harvest.
Yikes!
Yeah, your firstborn son, you got to kill him and give him to Yahweh. This is the Molech sacrifice.
That's it.
You would burn him alive as an offering to Yahweh. Later in Isaiah, and I believe again in Jeremiah, Yahweh's going to say, look, I know y'all are sacrificing your sons to me. But I don't want you doing that anymore. I never told you to do that. And it's like, Yahweh, you need to go back and read Exodus, where you said it.
Man.
In between the produce and the beef.
Yep.
You said the people.
And literally, you shall do the same. The words are there.
Yeah. Now later they're going to say, well, you're going to. There's going to be a later chapter where it says you're going to redeem your firstborn by sacrificing an animal in their place.
Wow.
And this is a mirror of the whole thing with Abraham and Isaac. Okay, we no longer do human sacrifice. Now we sacrifice an animal in its place. They got this from the Greeks who they did the same thing. Somebody was sacrificing somebody else to Zeus, and Zeus got mad. He sent a messenger, and they're like, no, look, get this ram over here and sacrifice the ram. And so they take the ram and they sacrifice it, and then they took the fleece, and the fleece turned to gold, and it got hung up in a tree, and that was the legend of the golden fleece. And that's where that whole Abraham story came from. Well, these are stories to say why we don't offer our children up as living sacrifices anymore. We don't burn our children alive or kill them with a knife. And instead they replace it with something else. And so what they have now is on the 8th day, you redeem your child by sacrificing like a sheep or something in his place, and then you circumcise the kid. And so now the kid is consecrated to Yahweh, and Yahweh still gets his blood sacrifice when you go and slaughter this poor animal. So yeah, that's a thing that's going to replace what we just found here in verse 29.
This is very interesting. So it seems to me that God has a fetish and has been seeing his fetish therapist. And he said, okay, instead of killing kids, maybe we just move up a little bit and kill the animals instead of the kid. How about that? This is God needs help, y'all. Like we need to get this dude some insurance so he can see a better therapist.
Yeah. And like this is gonna keep on going because like in the New Testament, he's like, you know what? Y'all, I ain't had a kid sacrificed to me in a long time. Here, you can just sacrifice mine. And I was like, dude,
he needs a fix so bad that he just like, I'll just sacrifice mine. I gotta like sacrifice somebody.
He's got the shakes.
Yes,
dude, go get you like a nicotine patch or something.
I'm telling you. Oh man, this is gonna make me want a cigarette now. Yikes! All right.
Yeah, this is ancient blood magic, and this was common in the ancient, like, you sacrificed all sorts of stuff to your imaginary friends, and the Jews were no different. And they performed human sacrifice. There's a book called, like Child Sacrifice in Ancient Israel by Heath Durrell, I believe. My girlfriend got me that book for one of our anniversaries, a very romantic gift, a book about child sacrifice. Fantastic book, and it goes into extreme detail about, Yahweh accepting human sacrifice.
Wow.
So yeah.
Man, and you know what's funny from a charismatic perspective, these scriptures, especially those talking about these these best of the best offerings, these first offerings, we use these scriptures quite often without dealing with the context to reframe to get more money. And so like early between February and April, you will see a lot of the charismatic churches having first fruit Sundays, harvest Sundays, give your best Sundays, show me what you got Sundays, empty your wallet Sundays. And it's all built around income tax time. But the scriptures they're typically pulling on are these antiquated first fruit type scriptures. It's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And when you show up to Joel Osteen's church and just like give him a kid, he gets all upset about that.
Yes. Oh man, that's hilarious.
I don't know.
Oh man, it's like these guys aren't reading the book that they're preaching.
Right?
Oh, but most of them, and I will let y'all in on a little secret as far as the charismatic crew, most of them just open the Bible to pull in obligatory scripture. And the majority of the stuff that they're preaching, by far and large, the majority of the stuff they're preaching, they're pulling from self-help books. So it's like they're using self-help books for the majority of the preaching, and then they come right back around and just throw a little bit of Jesus in there, a little bit of Bible in there to try to make the whole thing fit together. So Joel would absolutely be surprised that you bringing a baby to him. He'd absolutely think it was unbiblical, which would demonstrate that he's not studied the Bible. I love it. Oh, man. All right. So we got one more verse in this chapter. And it says, you shall be people consecrated to me. So you shall not eat any meat that is mangled by beasts in the field. You shall throw. Oh, I think I read that. I did read that. We were finished. But it just like that means God has like really like respectable issues. Like, oh, I can't believe you're eating that. I can't be your God anymore. Like that's pretty shallow on God's behalf. I'm just gonna call that out. All right, so we're in chapter 23. Hopefully, this is a much positive chapter because it starts off with justice for all. I don't see liberty there, so we'll see how this goes. So let's see. All right, so verse 1, you shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with the wicked to act as a malicious witness. You shall not follow a majority in wrongdoing. I agree with that. When you bear witness in a lawsuit, you shall not side with the majority so as to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to the poor in a lawsuit. Interesting phrasing.
Yeah, and so what it's talking about here, and I can get behind every bit of this, is that you like, you see a bunch of people just, being scumbags. You should stand against them. Don't go along with the crowd because it's easy. Don't show partiality. And like, that's what this whole thing is about. Like, don't give false witness, be honest, be a decent person. Like, these first 3 verses, hey, that's awesome. Like, cool. I can get behind all of that. Now, there are other verses, I'm trying to remember exactly where it, instead of saying like, don't be partial to the poor in a lawsuit, it says like, don't be partial. And the phrasing is, it has slightly different phrasing, but it's the same message. It's like, not just toward the poor or the rich or whatever. It's just like, don't show partiality. Okay. But that's what they're saying here. Don't just automatically favor a side. Instead, you should render judgments honestly. So, hey, they got a good one. I mean, it took us like 3 chapters to find it, but they got a good one in here. And you didn't even have to sacrifice a baby to do it.
And to be clear, that's literally 3 chapters of instructions before you found one decent instruction.
Yeah, like, okay, you can purchase your rape victim. Here's how you sell your daughter. You can beat your slave until his eye pops out.
Man.
Don't be a scumbag of a judge. Instead, be honest. Oh, wow.
Finally, some good news. But it's like, how do I not be a scumbag of a judge while following all the other laws you just gave me?
Right.
Man. These are like mafia laws at this moment.
Yeah.
Oh, yikes. Okay. All right. Verse 4, when you come upon your enemy's ox or donkey going astray, you should bring it back. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. Like, oh, you don't like your neighbor, he's kind of a dick,
Yeah.
but that's still do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
Even to people you don't like. See, I can get behind this section of the chapter. Let's keep going, see where this takes us.
I'm liking it so far. He says, when you see the donkey of one who hates you struggling under its burden and you would hold back from setting it free, you must help to set it free. You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in their lawsuits. Keep far from a false charge and do not kill the innocent and those in the right, for I will not acquit the guilty. You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds officials and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a resident alien. You know the heart of an alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. This guy sounds nice so far.
Yeah. We got 9 good ones in a row. That's awesome.
Man, let's see what happens here. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, so that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the wild animals may eat. You shall do the same with your vineyard and your olive orchard. That's that triple down economics for those of you who've been wondering. That's what that is. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, so that your ox and your donkey may have relief, and your homeborn slave and the resident alien may be refreshed. Be attentive to all that I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not even let them be heard on your lips. Anathema.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is the Sabbath years. So the same thing, you work 6 days and then you take a day off because, the 7th day was the final part of the creation. It was set aside for Yahweh. And you do the same thing. Okay, you're not going to plant any crops in this field. You got to let it lay fallow for a year to kind of replenish the thing. This was also common practice, and like it still is. You still have like fallow years for fields. Though now a lot of people, they use like various additives to their land, or they alternate what crops, to use different things to restore certain nutrients. I've been growing this for several years. I need to plant this next year to restore the nitrogen, things like that.
So people found a better way than God, I hear, is what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, other people had these same practices. It's like traditional farming practices, but here what they're doing is they're wrapping it up with their whole idea of the Sabbath. And so, okay, we've got this 6-day creation story, and then the 7th day is the Sabbath. We're going to do the same thing with our years and say that the reason for it is because it serves Yahweh, instead of it just being wise farming practices. So yeah, that's what we're seeing here.
Would that's something that you see a lot in cultural Christianity and folklore style Christianity. Christianity that still is kind of connected to that, which I grew up in a lot of that. And so I see that type of homespun wisdom all the time, where it just comes off as, child, if God had to rest after 6 days, even the land got to rest. And that's so I can easily see how people could draw those connections.
Yeah.
That is awesome. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit. This again, these verses are like they're making me smile because it's hilarious. Look, listen to this. 3 times in the year you shall hold a festival for me. Needy much? God is like, I need 3 parties a year. Like, if I can get at least 3 parties a year, what is you doing? Who am I even to you if I can't get 3 parties? That's just like, oh man. But he says, you shall observe the festival of unleavened bread as I commanded you. You shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Egypt. No one better show up before me empty-handed. I'm going to translate that for those of you in the back. He says, bitch better have my money. I just wanted y'all to understand. I'm back to regularly scheduled programming. You shall observe the festival of harvest, or the first fruits of your labor. of what you sow in the field. You shall observe the festival of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. 3 times in the year all your males shall appear before the Lord God. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, or let the fat of my festival remain until the morning. The choice of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. All right, everybody, you heard it. That's pretty decent advice there. Don't boil kids in mother's milk.
Yeah. Now, I want you to scroll back up a little bit. Right there. Yeah, right there's good. Okay, so we got these annual festivals here, okay? Now, look at verse 15. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread.
Yeah.
They forgot something.
Uh-oh.
They forgot to call it Passover.
Oh, got him.
The name got changed. Like, we just read like half a book about it. And here, they have no idea that the angel of death went and murdered a bunch of babies.
Oh, wow.
This was written during one stage of the development of that story, but wasn't written after the whole Passover thing. Remember when we were doing that section and that whole thing got added in, and I had you skip from the middle of one chapter to the beginning of the next one?
Yes.
Yeah, that stuff about the whole angel of death coming in and all that got added in later, okay? And by skipping it, you were able to see that. So, those 2 sections, or the continuation, that had been written, this was written, and then that addition got added in later. And that's where the thing goes from just unleavened bread to Passover. And like these people, they like going up to like the 6th, 5th, even 4th century, they knew about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But no one had any idea about this whole Passover thing in which an angel of death was flying around killing people, and you had to put blood on the door. And when this section right here was written, they still didn't know about that story. They just knew that you did some stuff and then you left. That's a nifty little thing. And now these festivals, these are old pagan festivals, like the Festival of Ingathering. What you did was you went out and basically it was one of the harvest festivals. I don't remember if it was spring or fall. I can never keep their calendar straight, and it would help if they actually stuck to one instead of changing it up every few generations. I got their old solar calendar in my head a lot better than this new lunar thing. But what they did was there was also a thing, it was called like the Festival of Booths. And the reason it was called that is because a lot of people, migrant workers and people from the cities and everything else, they would go out into the fields to harvest all the grain and everything else. But to do this, you can't be traveling all the way back to your home and then back out to the fields every day, because some of these people may have lived, dozens of miles away. So they would take, basically it's like detritus. They would take like palm branches and all sorts of stuff, and they would build these little huts, and that's where they would sleep or to just rest during the heat of the day. And so out in the fields, you had all these booths set up, these little huts, and that's, it was basically like temporary shelters for the workers until the harvest was complete. And so it became called like the Festival of Booths. And this was an ancient Canaanite practice. This had been going on for like a couple thousand years. Well, the Jews come along. They're Canaanites. They're still doing the same things. But now they're trying to take all of these ancient practices and they're trying to come up with a story in which Yahweh gets them to start doing it. That way, if someone says, hey, why do we do these things? They say, well,
because God said so.
Yahweh, and that's basically, and that's why it doesn't make any sense half the time, or that's why it's contradictory. Yahweh says to do this. Well, in this other time of the year, we do this other thing. Well, Yahweh said to also do that. Yahweh says to perform a census. Oh, Yahweh is actually against counting the people. That's what they were doing. Wow. They were trying to come up with a Yahwistic pedigree for all these ancient pagan practices. And a lot of these things, like some of these things, like the booths, that was just how you did it because it was the easiest way. But the Canaanites had their own stories about how the gods told them to do it. And that's why you had to have a Yahwistic pedigree for it, because you had to get rid of the idea that another god did it.
Absolutely. Oh, man, this is good stuff. Okay. We have a super chat. I got to read it, and I love it. Norbert is awesome. He is in here, man. He says, I'm in for an in-person event for all of our community. I think that would be a great movement. They will know us by our love for one another. I absolutely love the infusion of scripture with there, and I 100% agree with that idea. We're going to make that happen. We're definitely going to make that happen.
Oh, and this thing right here in verse 19, you shall not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk.
Yes.
This is going to come up again when Moses has to go up and get all of the 10 commandments a second time. And Yahweh is like, yeah, I'm totally going to give you the commandments again. You broke them the first time. I'm going to give you another copy. And it says it's identical to the first copy. And it's like 10 completely different laws. This one, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk, is going to make the cut the second time around. This is a prohibition against a specific type of Canaanite sacrifice. You would actually, you would take like a baby goat, you would sacrifice it, and you would actually cook it in the milk of its mother. I don't remember all the details of it, but this was a thing they used to do, and now they don't do it anymore. So they've got to have a whole law against it.
Okay, so the next time I cook something, I think I want to cook it in the milk just to see how that goes.
Right?
Oh, right. Man. All right, now we get back to Canaan as if it's a new place. So let's check this out. It says, I'm going to send an angel in front of you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Be attentive to him and listen to his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression. For my name is in him. That sounds kind of nasty, God. All right. But if you listen attentively to his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. When my angel goes in front of you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and I blot them out, you shall not bow down to their gods or serve them or follow their practices. But you shall utterly demolish them and break their pillars in pieces. You shall serve the Lord your God, and I will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from among you. No one shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror in front of you and will throw into confusion all the people against with whom you shall come. And I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I will send swarms of hornets in front of you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the wild animals multiply against you. Little by little, I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and possessed the land, because apparently he can't do it over fucking night. Lazy ass God. Sorry. I will set your borders from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines and from the wilderness to the Euphrates, for I will hand over to you the inhabitants of the land, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not live in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. And let the church say, amen. All right. Jason, what the hell did we just read?
All right, so Yahweh is sending out one of his divine hitmen that's called the Terror. This is not good. I shouldn't have to tell you that anything called the Terror is going to be not good. Now, whenever it's written, it's in the Hebrew, it's written as sort of almost like a proper noun. They're not. He's not just saying, "Oh, my angel's going to be scary." No, he's saying like, if this is called the Terror, this is a specific thing. This is some sort of agent of destruction that he's sending out. Think of it like the things that are released in the book of Revelation. They may have common names, like famine and stuff, but these are some sort of divine agents that are meant to cause some sort of, destruction. So that's what he's sending here. This is an ancient monster. Okay, this is one of those little tidbits of Hebrew mythology that people don't really recognize anymore. Okay, so Yahweh is sending some sort of demigod or something, a lesser god, a monster of some sort that's going to go out and terrorize the people. And in verse 28, the Hebrew word that is used could be translated to mean hornets. It could also be translated to be plagues or calamity. It's not really sure what exactly is meant, but his terror is going to go through and cause a whole bunch of really bad days for the people who live in the land of Canaan. Now, another thing is, he says, I'm not going to remove them all in a single year. This is a problem because it's supposed to take 40 years for them to just reach the place. And he's talking about a 1-year timeline. But he's like, I'm going to start removing them as you take over bits of the land and gradually push them all the way back from the entire thing.
Wow.
When they wrote this, they didn't yet have the idea that it was going to take 40 years just to reach the place. They're going to get there within a year, and he's going to start removing them bit by bit at that point. The 40-year detail hasn't been added into the story yet. Remember, we encountered one of those sentences, and it interrupted the text. Those are the 40-year wandering that was added in at a later date. It isn't originally part of the story. Remember, Exodus was written in multiple layers over the course of generations. So they're going to go from Egypt to Canaan in 1 year, and when they get there, Yahweh's going to send out his terror to start killing people and running them off so that the Hebrews could start gobbling up parts of the land. So he's not going to do all of it in 1 year. They're going to get there in a year, and they'll gradually take over the land. So that's a little detail that people often miss. Now, when he starts outlining the boundaries of the land, there's a problem here. All of this area belongs to Egypt. Like at this point in time, it all belonged to Egypt. What they're talking about here is the boundaries of the land many, many, many centuries later, at the time that the author's actually writing, because he didn't realize that the boundaries of the land changed constantly.
Wow.
So that's what you're seeing in that part. Now, the reward for serving Yahweh, remember in previous episodes we talked about that suzerainty law code. He repeats it here. If you serve Yahweh, remember, I am your God. I took you out of the land of Egypt. Here's all the things I did, as your master to be worthy of your praise. Now, here's what you have to do. And here's your reward. You'll get land, long life, and fertile women. And so this whole thing, it's talking about like land and it'll be fertile land. You'll get fertile women. You'll have a
Yeah.
long life. These are your rewards if you obey my commands. This is all part of that contract, the
Wow.
Deuteronomic land deal that we're dealing with. That's where all of this comes from.
I like the phraseology of that Deuteronomic.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
Deuteronomic. I like that.
Yeah. And the last little part we have to go over, as they go through, they're supposed to trash all of these idols and altars and temples and everything else. This will be the first time we mention this here, but this is a characteristic of the Hebrew religion. It is an example of what is called an anti-religion. So in the ancient world, most religions were tolerant of other religions. Like,
That's right.
let's
Yes.
say you worshipped Poseidon. At the end, you're hanging out in Egypt, and there's all these temples and stuff to Osiris, and you want good things to happen. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna go and work, pay homage to Osiris. Okay, cool. You can go do that. This wasn't a problem. Now, Judaism comes along. They're very much an anti-religion. Their religion exists to the exclusion of other religious practices.
Wow.
You worship their religion, and you don't worship others. Evolutionarily speaking, this is a very powerful and successful tool.
Absolutely.
So think about this. Let's say you worship the god Baal Hadad, and you also worship Aphrodite, and you worship Osiris and Serapis.
Serapis.
Cool. All of those temples benefit from your patronage. Here's a problem, though. They each only get a quarter of the stuff because you're splitting it up over 4 different gods.
Yes.
What if one of those says, to worship me, you can't worship the other 3?
Wow.
Now they get all of your stuff. But not only do they get 100% of your sacrifices, the other temples get 0%.
That's right.
By doing that, you have now made worship of these other things less beneficial. Like those temples are going to receive less. And the more your cult spreads, it does so at the detriment of the other cults. And this also reduces the tolerance of your followers for these other cults, which makes other people less likely to attend those temples out of fear of, some sort of retribution from the members of your cult. Now, this didn't start with Judaism. The first example of an anti-religion also happened to be our first example of monotheism, and that was the cult of Akhenaten.
Yes, Atonism. Yes.
Yes. So this was Amenhotep IV. He changed his name to Akhenaten. He fully embraced the religion that his father invented, and you didn't create images of your god. Instead, he was just sort of represented through the symbol of a sun, the solar disk, and all worship and stuff basically went through the king. You couldn't actually contact the deity yourself. You had to do it through the king. And so he sort of took away contact with the god and even the promise of the afterlife from the general populace. Everything had to be funneled through the divine king, who was his avatar on earth. And to incorporate this, to institute this, all of the other deities, like their temples were shut down and stuff, and the gods themselves were basically removed from Egypt. Like all the Egyptian gods, you can't worship them. That's illegal. You only worship the Aten, the divine solar disk, and you do that through the worship and following of the king. And this really upset a lot of people.
Wow.
And to put this into perspective, like how much they hated this dude. Okay?
Yes, it got bad.
So for a long time, people were going over there, we're studying Egypt, we're like, man, like everyone is like fascinated with Egypt for like a century.
Yes.
And, discover King Tut's tomb, and we learn all about him. We learn about his mother. We've got all this stuff. Most well-documented king in Egyptian history. We know more about that dude who lived a very short life than any other pharaoh. His father, Akhenaten.
Come on, sir.
We know so little about him because when he died, they went around chiseling his name off of monuments. Statues and stuff of him were torn down. Like they went and they did their best to erase any mention of the dude. His son had to change his name in order to not be killed. His name wasn't Tutankhamun. It was like Tutankhamen's or something like that. Yep. He literally had to change his name. Otherwise, he would have died. Okay. So the most well-known pharaoh was the son of the pharaoh we know the least about.
That's right.
Yeah. So the same time period. That's how much they hated this dude. Atenism survived for about 40 years. And then it was eradicated, and the old gods returned, and that was that. But it was a counter-religion. It was an anti-religion. You followed this to the exclusion of all others. And there's a great deal of Atenism, some elements, the themes, the way you did certain things left over that kind of drifted about. And they didn't really find a home. But some of these ideas and practices start to pop up again on the other side of the Red Sea. And it's been postulated that some of the priests of Aten fled after Akhenaten's death and went east into the Sinai. And they got wrapped up with the little cults of Yahweh and Hathor and some others. And their practices got wrapped up with the religions of these other gods over there. And that's how Yahwism became an anti-religion. That's all speculation. There's an author... a scholar named Jan Assmann who talks about this. There's a book called Moses the Egyptian that goes into depth on that topic. I'm not completely sold on it. There's this huge, we're talking like nearly 1,000-year gap.
Yeah.
At the same time, they're right there. They're we're talking like bordering nations.
Yep.
Egypt ruled over Canaan at the time. There was a lot of stuff going back and forth. We've got the Amarna letters that talk about,
Yes. So
it's very possible. We don't have the evidence to support it.
We don't have the connection yet. Yeah.
So who knows what happened, but it's very intriguing, especially when you see how the two religions behave. They're so close together. There's a lot of stuff a lot of similarities. But yeah, so that's what we're seeing in this little spot right here at the end of this chapter, where it talks about how for Yahwism to spread, you have to stamp out the other religions. This is something they have in common with Atenism, whether they got it from there or it was just sort of a lingering remnant, or if they just kind of came up with it on their own.
That's good context. Man, because we do see Egypt as a prevalent theme throughout Israel, throughout the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament as well. We see Egypt kind of reappear even with Jesus' character having to go hide in Egypt for a while. And it is often wondered why these early constructors of these stories would feel the need to attach their stories to Egypt in ways that were so, at this moment, so, we can clearly see, like, this isn't what happened. You didn't spend 400 years here. And if you did, you weren't slaves. There may have been 400 years of successive arrivals type of thing in different people groups, or this could be dealing with 400 years of being under Egyptian subjugation as Canaanites. But this other part, we don't know. But it is, or we don't know, but the other part we're pretty sure didn't happen. So it is very interesting how they bring Egypt back in. And I wanted to call out as well, like, because for those of you who are interested in Akhenaten, this character in Egypt's history is absolutely fascinating. So much so that, like, you're gonna hear his name mentioned on Ancient Aliens and shit like that, because they love to build mystery around this guy. Because he was so vehemently anathematized, his name had to be erased from history. Not only was his son one of the most popular pharaohs that have ever been mentioned, his parents as well were very forthright leading pharaohs. His mother was Queen Tai, who was one of the few pharaohs who ruled almost as a co-pharaoh with her husband. Mm-hmm. We still have her statues and stuff up around. And then, of course, his father was Amenhotep III. It's amazing that there's this incredible lineage, and then this dude goes strong on monotheism, and they're like, nah, he got to go. Whatever happened under that dude's reign, I feel like it looked like America, and the Egyptians said, nope, this is too much for us. We never want to go back here again. Let's destroy this now. Let's put an end to this.
Yeah. There's this one. Again, this is extremely unlikely. I think it's people just trying to find connections. But I read one little hypothesis that priests of Akhenaten, they traveled east to escape Egypt after the pharaoh died, and after they traveled east, they passed up the Sinai and they went through Arabia and all that, and they went into Persia. And this is why in Zoroastrianism it says that Zarathustra came from the west, the western provinces of Persia, and brought this idea of monotheism to the Persian religion, which also in many cases acted like an anti-religion. I find the idea fascinating. Again,
speculative for sure.
It's a cool idea. It'd be really awesome if we could ever prove that. But at the same time, we're still talking about a pretty substantial gap, multiple centuries. There's actually a lot more differences between Atenism and Zoroastrianism.
Oh, for sure, yes.
Certain aspects of the Hebrew religion are much closer to Atenism. But it's still cool to think about, but I'm not sold on it. It's not a thing that I'm saying, oh, this likely happened. I don't think it did.
Right. The only way
one you might hear.
The only way I could see that one making like full sense is if it wasn't something that actually impacted the Israelites who were post-exilic, if you will. But instead it was a story that they had heard about how the Persians may have been introduced that, and in an attempt to separate their belief systems from the Persian belief system, it's almost like the scapegoat and say, no, we got this from the Egyptians, not the Persians. The Persians didn't do this to us. We got this from the people who the Persians got it from. Which you kind of see those stories. You see different things like that with marginalized groups where they identify a group that they feel that it is better to be related to be identified with. And so, but that is fascinating. And what I love about that is that, like, obviously that's in the arena of speculation, but hopefully that'll give somebody an assignment. Somebody will go out and do the anthropology and find out if that connection is actually there or not. And that's definitely one of the things I was thinking about earlier today, as we wrap up, is that one of the things that I love about seeing in the deconstruction community is how many people who have taken a scholastic approach to biblical literature, and not just biblical literature, but Canaanite literature as a whole. Which I think one of the major disservices that our fascination or attachment with Christianity has done is that it has created a huge blind spot for us as far as what Middle Eastern culture actually looked like over the years, because we've kind of just taken it and said, okay, this is our version of the Bible, and our version of the Bible is now reflective and representative of everything that was happening over here. So when I see people deconstruct and actually take a scholastic approach to that, it's damn near life-giving, because yes, while we're learning the Bible and laughing at the bullshit, we're also learning about a myriad of cultures that have lived their lives and played the stage on this planet. And so it's just absolutely fascinating to me. So I'm going to shut up for a moment and do what we do every week, and just to kind of allow you to close out, let people know where to follow you, and share any final thoughts. And I'm going to take my ass off the stage for a moment and finish drinking my Four Loko. If I can get my mouse to the right place.
All right. So as I'm sure you all know, I'm the host of the Dragons of Genesis podcast. It's a monthly audio format show that you can find on any podcast app, whether it's Good Pods, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever Google is using these days, Apple Podcast or whatever. Just search Dragons and Genesis and look for the big orange logo that has Godzilla attacking Jerusalem. That's me. If you want to find anything else, just head over to dragonsofgenesis.com. There's links to pretty much everything. There's also a big list of like recommended reading and things like that. As for what I'm doing now, I've gone back to redo the audio on the original 14 episodes that cover the book of Genesis. The first episode has already dropped. It's sort of an introduction to the podcast that tells like what types of Bibles we're going to be using and how we're going to approach the entire endeavor. And episode 2, which will be dropping within the next week or two, is going to go into the 6-day creation story and all the fun mythology behind that, and how it's a very complex piece of literature, and the different days in the first half of the creation is meant to mirror those in the second half. After that, we go right into the Garden of Eden. We've got the talking snakes. We've got the possibility that Yahweh is Cain's father. So that's always fun. And then we go into the crazy genealogies and why the people before the flood lived for many, many centuries. And that's one of those where if you look it up, you're going to find a lot of speculation and no clear answer. I've got the answer and the math to back it up. So that's coming up soon. And then after that, we're going to dive into the story of Noah, or actually the multiple stories of Noah, because there's 2 of them contained in Genesis chapters 6 through 9. But there's also other versions of the Noah story you haven't heard before. We're also going to dig into the stuff about like where the stories came from. And no, it wasn't when like the Black Sea flooded or when the Mediterranean flooded or something like that. It's much smaller in scale. A single river, a handful of cities, and some stories that came from that. And again, we've got some numbers to go in there, specifically like the number 15. that'll make sense when you listen to the episode. But we've also got other versions of the Noah story itself, including one in which he comes out as like a talking baby and he glows. I promise you haven't read that story, but we're going to cover it in that episode. So lots of cool stuff coming. We've got the Greek origins of the Abraham story. We've got the parallels between the Noah story and the Tower of Babel. We've got all sorts of good stuff coming up. So dragonsofgenesis.com or search Dragons of Genesis on any of your podcast apps and you'll find it.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to finding the glowing baby story myself. That sounds like my type of foolishness, my
Glowing
type of
baby
carrying
Noah.
on. That is going to be awesome.
There's even a reference in the Hebrew Bible itself that Noah was semi-divine.
Yeah, I've heard about this. Like perhaps he was like one of the sons of the Watchers or something, or one of the sons of the sons of men coming down with or the sons of God coming down with the daughters of women, daughters of men type of thing, not daughters of women. The Bible doesn't believe in such a thing. Women don't have kids. No, it's only men.
Men have the kids. They come out of our ribs. Read the book.
Right.
Duh.
Oh, I love this. Well, man, thank you so much for hanging with me tonight. I'm going to drop you into the backstage. Listen, everybody, these are phenomenal. These are absolutely exceptional. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better partner in these conversations. Number one, because I get to kind of chill a little bit and just really enjoy and ask questions and pull from. I'm so glad that y'all are here and loving these. Yes, Norbert, the glowing baby Noah. Like, that is an amazing thing. And so please support Jason and the work that he's doing over there. This is how you build community, man. We're all in this together. And I'm actually super proud of myself because we were able to do a full 2 hours tonight, even though I am being dinged like crazy from work right now. So I am literally going to have to jump off of here and jump right back to my work computer and to see what's going on. I'm still working to get them calibrated to like, hey, on Wednesday nights I have Bible study. And because it's Bible study, it's like a religious right. So they gotta respect it. You know what I'm saying? Which I was that way when I was a pastor. I don't plan on letting off the gas. But I do have to go and jump into work shortly. I do want to say thank you all so much for your support. It means so much. When Jason spoke earlier about the reason he's still doing it is because of the type of engagement that he's been getting in the chat. Man, you all have no idea. Like, the past few weeks, my work schedule has been like nightmarish. But I look forward to these moments, whether it's Bible study with an ex-pastor, Sunday sessions, the ex-pastor call-in show, or just being able to drop content and then coming back and reading the comments and engaging the comments. It's damn near life-giving. And so I do want to say thank you all so much. I appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to the work that we continue to do together. Again, this is about community, and community is what community does. Norbert dropped in earlier about the idea of doing an on-site Bible study with an ex-pastor. Hey, just know you ain't said nothing but a word, because that's the plan. The plan is, like, again, I'm not trying to build a personality cult by any stretch of the imagination. The plan is to build community online that transitions to community in real life, because that's what people need. It's nice for people to have a YouTube channel to come to. These are incredibly helpful. But at the end of the day, people need hubs where they are, when they are, so they can really have the support that they need. And we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of laughs. But at the end of the day, this is about helping people be better. On our Sunday sessions, we talk about healthy people leads to healthy relationships, and that leads to healthy outcomes, which means you don't get the healthy outcomes until you have healthy people. But it's really hard to have healthy people without healthy relationships. And that's why community becomes imperative. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for acknowledging how fun this is, because this is fun as fuck, right? Like, it is. Like, this is the Bible study I've always wanted. We can be in the middle of Bible study and I can do this. And y'all hang out with me long enough. Eventually, I'll be rolling up a blunt right in the middle of it. Like, all right, go ahead, Jason. Yeah. And you'll get to see that whole scene and we'll have a good time, because ultimately we're learning how to be human again. We're learning how to love each other, appreciate each other, value each other. We're not requiring anybody to conform to any type of imagery, any type of respectability politics. Share what you have that's of value, and we're here to value it. All right, that's all I got, because I literally got to get my ass back to work. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining, supporting, or connecting, or all of the above, with this community channel or content in any way that makes sense to you. And check out the merch, because it's dope as fuck, and that's a good reason to check merch out. And also, we have books on Amazon or wherever books can be sold online. Now, until next time, keep rising, stay progressive. And I don't know why I started saying this, but it works really well. Stay beautiful, but only if you can, because some people have a harder time with that than others. I'll holler at you later. I love y'all.